The Imperium of Earth has ruled the stars with an iron fist for 10,000 years. But an uprising has taken place and has gathered a fleet to overthrow the totalitarian regime of the evil Imperium for good. In response, a large Imperium fleet has been dispatched from Earth to quell the uprising. And the fate of this epic battle will be decided by two players who will flick dice at each other until the galaxy is once more either under the iron fist of the Imperium or liberated by the plucky rebels of the uprising fleet. Hello and welcome to The Lucky Roll, an eclectic channel for eclectic games. And today we're reviewing Flickfleet, a two-player space combat dice dexterity game by Eurydice Games. A familiar yet classic setting for a space combat game that excels in its simplicity and fun, whose capital ships charmingly bear a passing resemblance to some of the more popular franchises out there. The game takes place on a 3-foot by 3-foot playing space. Normally, a square table is sufficient, and players set up their ships 2 inches from the edge of the 3-foot playing space opposite each other. Each ship has 2 actions per activation, and those actions are limited to movement, firing weapons, recharging shields, launching fighter or bomber wings, and repairing damage. The limitation of 2 actions per ship per round ensures a nice level of tensions, as players who are losing the shooting match must choose between evasion, defense, or firing back in the hope that they strike a lucky hit that turns the tide of battle for them. Combat is simplicity itself. A player simply places a dice on top of the ship doing the shooting, and they flick the dice at the target. If you hit the ship, you roll the same dice again to see where the ship was hit. If the dice misses, then you miss. If the dice hits the ship, but subsequently rolls off the table, you miss. Hello and welcome to the Imperium News Network. There was reports of a rebel uprising in the far reaches of the galaxy. Pay it no heed. Continue to suppress hope and enjoy your 7-day work week. That is all. If you launch a nuke, then you flick a d6. If you fire lasers, then you flick a d10. Now, the interesting thing about launching a nuke is that it never misses. You always roll a hit on a 1 to 6. Whereas if you fire lasers and you roll a 7+ on the subsequent hit, the attack misses. Provided, of course, that your opponent has no shields left to block you. Now, the larger capital and cruiser ships, of course, can take a beating, but are much bigger targets, whereas fighter and bomber wings are much more vulnerable, but become more mobile and harder to hit the more they are damaged. And this, to me, was one of the more clever aspects of this game. A freshly launched fighter wing has 3 circles, and as it takes damage, it becomes smaller, with the final circle being the most difficult to hit. The bomber wing is largely the same, but less maneuverable. The fighters can move in any direction because they're circular, whereas the bombers can only move generally in the direction that they are facing. Which brings me to the second fun part of this game, the movement. Movement for ships is done by flicking them in the desired direction. Flick a ship too hard and it flies off the table? Your ship was full of deserters who just abandoned your cause. Flick a ship into an opponent's ship by mistake, and you force them to engage in invasive maneuvers and change position. However, you can also do so deliberately by using your ships as kamikaze pilots, which can deal considerable damage to the other attacker. In other news, the dreadnought Aegis was destroyed by a weather balloon. Not uprising rebel scum. A weather balloon exploded and destroyed the Aegis. Long live the Imperium. You can also force other ships to desert their cause if the dice attack pushes the attacked ship off the table. You must remember, however, that if the dice follows the ship off the table, then it counts as a miss. So long shot and powerful dice flicks, whilst risky, can be very satisfying and great fun when you do pull them off. One of the more entertaining games of this that I played was when both my friend and I held position at the end of the table with our heavy ships and flicked both dice and kamikaze wings ludicrous distances across the table with the hope of forcing desertion on the other player. It was good, silly fun, and escalated to the point where we simply threw the dice at each other instead because we couldn't hit each other's ships. The fact that we escalated to that level of silliness is indicative of how fun and satisfying the simple concept of this game is. There's just something satisfying about flicking a physical dice-shaped missile at your opponents and hitting them. In domestic news, Imperium citizens can expect an extra protein tablet at the end of their weekly ration pack as a reward for increased productions in the year. In other news, the Minister for Budget has decided that all citizens must take a 10% wage cut. The components are good and solid and have a nice weight to them and work on both a smooth and game mat surface quite well. A well-varnished table, of course, does make the movement action a bit more treacherous, but it also makes it more fun. The other part of this game that I like is the scope of freedom it gives you. There's no limit to what you can do with these pieces but your own imagination. The rulebook has a nice, balanced point system for the ships, so players can field varied fleets that are still balanced to a fair enough degree. The other neat little touch that I like is the player dashboards. Despite being very functional, they're still aesthetically pleasing, and when a rebel ship or uprising ship is lost, the dashboard is turned over with a message such as "they live on in our hearts" or "their exploits will never be forgotten," whereas the Imperium have a callous and simple contact loss message. So to me, unlike the rebels, they don't actually mourn their dead or their lost, and it adds a nice little touch of cheesiness to the game that I always found amusing and amused anyone that I played this game with when they saw it for the first time. In a nutshell, the game is just fun. Pure, simple fun. The theme is charming, yet light enough to fuel the imagination without limiting it, and the instant accessibility and fast game time make this a perfect filler game for a night between games. It's also a perfect game for the end of an evening, where if you're still in the mood to game, but don't have the mental fortitude to explain yet another set of complex rules to your friends, it's a great way to end the night. If you found Star Trek Attack Wing or Star Wars X-Wing overly complex or drawn out at times for either yourself or your casual friends, then Flickfleet is a perfect alternative to scratch that space combat itch you might have. This is Sean from The Lucky Roll. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. And until next time, good luck and God bless.